On today's episode, we're continuing the series Would You Rather with the wide receiver position coming right up. And what is up, everyone? Welcome to the Gridiron Fantasy Football podcast for Tuesday, August 10th, 2021. And I'm Chip, I'm your host, and thank you so much for listening today. If you're a new listener, thank you so much for joining us as well. If you'd like to share our podcast, you can find us over on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. If you'd like to watch us, you can watch us over on YouTube at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So please do me a favor, support the show, hit subscribe so you don't miss any more episodes. And on today's episode, we're continuing the series Would You Rather. And then today we're going to be doing the wide receiver position. The last couple of weeks I did the quarterback position. Now last week was the running back position. This week is the wide receiver. And I really like doing these videos and podcasts because I feel like, it is an extension to the mock drafts. If you're watching on YouTube and you've been watching the mock draft, I know I kind of give some explanation between who I would pick in that moment during the draft, but this gives you a little more detail about what all goes into, picking a player. Sometimes, it's just not as easy as picking the higher ranked player because it's all about where you think there's different tiers and different players that could give you better value. And are you going to be drafting a player at its top value, or is there room there that you can grab someone else and then grab this one player later on to, hopefully give you better value there and whatnot. So I really like this series, and like I said, it's been fun for me to do because it kind of gives you a little more in-depth detail on kind of my process and when I think about certain players when I am picking some between two different players. So like I said, we're doing the wide receiver position, and I picked three pairs of players that are pretty close in rankings and kind of give you my input on who I would pick between these three pairs of players. So the first pair of players I got is Tyreek Hill versus Stefon Diggs, right? Right now, Tyreek Hill is ranked as the consensus wide receiver 1, and Diggs is the wide receiver 2. Last year, Hill finished 2020 as the wide receiver 2. He had 328.9 PPR points. Diggs was the wide receiver 3 with 328.6 PPR points. So a fraction of improvement from Hill compared to Diggs. Now Diggs led the league last year in receiving with 1,535 yards and 8 touchdowns. Hill was 8th with 1,276 yards, and he had 15 receiving touchdowns. Now, obviously, the Chiefs last year had the number 1 overall passing offense compared to the Bills with the 3rd overall offense. Tyreek Hill, he did get 2 rushing touchdowns. He had 13 attempts. Diggs had 0 rushing touchdowns. He only had 1 attempt. So if you look at Diggs overall, he had over 30 more targets than Hill, and then 40 more receptions than Hill. So that's a crazy stat that I didn't see until I was looking at these comparables. And then Hill was thrown to more in the red zone and scored double the amount of touchdowns in the red zone, 14 to Diggs 7. So pretty massive difference on Tyreek Hill to Stefon Diggs. Now, when it comes to their strength of schedule, sometimes when I draft a player, it's all about strength of schedule to me on who has a better strength of schedule throughout the regular season and throughout the playoffs. And honestly, they're equal. There's not one player that has a better schedule than the other. So when you iron out what Tyreek Hill did last year compared to Diggs, based on what could be the chances of that being replicated this year, honestly, I'm leaning towards Tyreek Hill. Even though Hill isn't the first option with the Kansas City Chiefs. Travis Kelce will lead in targets and yardage there. It's been like that, for the last few years. The thing is, like Tyreek Hill, but he doesn't need a lot of volume to be a top 5 wide receiver or be the first, the number 1 receiver to finish throughout the fantasy season. So that's the thing about Tyreek Hill. He doesn't need a lot of, he's very efficient. He doesn't need a lot of targets to be a top receiver. And honestly, I think that with Sammy Watkins going to the Baltimore Ravens, I think that really helps Tyreek Hill in getting more targets. He'll get a little bit of a bump in the targets. And, I know they have Mecole Hardman still, and Travis Kelce. I got Tyreek Hill. Then Tyreek Hill, and then you got Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the backfield. But I want to go to the guy that has been relatively healthy throughout his career, and that's been Tyreek Hill. Last year was Stefon Diggs' first season. He played a full 16 games. So that's something about availability. Maybe this was the turnaround for Stefon Diggs, where we're going to see him play more consistently and not be, missing games with injuries and all that. But, I want to see a guy that is consistently giving me those top numbers, and Tyreek Hill has been that guy. He's so fun to watch. He can score. I mean, both players can score at any part of the field, but it just seems like the Chiefs just know how to do a little bit more better than the Buffalo Bills. Even though Josh Allen's no slouch, he has a rocket arm, and Stefon Diggs is a pretty fast receiver too. But Hill obviously is arguably the fastest receiver in the league. But that's who I lean towards. I lean towards Tyreek Hill, and I love seeing Stefon Diggs being ranked so high, because last year he was ranked somewhere in the 20s, if I remember correctly. And so for him to see him take a huge jump from last season to this season is pretty cool to see. But like I said, I mean, I'm not gonna be mad if he chose Stefon Diggs over Tyreek Hill. I know there's probably some players that will. There's a lot to like about Stefon Diggs. I mean, he is the number one option. They're gonna feed him the targets. I mean, he led the whole league last year in targets. So I think that we'll probably see the same if he stays healthy. So I wouldn't be mad there. But for me, if I had an option between the two in a PPR format, I'm taking Tyreek Hill. Then my second pair of players that I have here on my list is Calvin Ridley versus Justin Jefferson. So, Calvin Ridley last year blew up. He was a guy that was expected to blow up. It was almost like the Chris Godwin from the year before, where we felt like Chris Godwin was going to be that guy, and last year it was Calvin Ridley. Right now, Ridley is being ranked as the wide receiver 5, and Jefferson is ranked at wide receiver 6. Ridley finished last year as the wide receiver 5 with 281.5 PPR points. Justin Jefferson was the wide receiver 6 with 274.2 PPR points, and Ridley was 6th in receiving with 1,374 yards and 9 touchdowns, and Jefferson was 4th with even 1,400 yards and 7 touchdowns. Now, the Falcons' passing offense was 5th overall compared to the Vikings, who were 14th overall. Neither of them had any rushing touchdowns or attempts, but really had more targets he had more targets and receptions than Justin Jefferson, and really had more red zone and end zone targets than Jefferson. So I think that's going to be obvious based on the fact that the Falcons are a pass-heavy offense and the Vikings are a run-heavy offense with Dalvin Cook. So I think that when you look at that and you look at the strength of schedule, Ridley has a slight advantage when it comes to strength of schedule. So if I had to choose between Ridley and Justin Jefferson, I think my choice, I slightly give the edge to Ridley. So I think with Julio gone, the sky's the limit for Calvin Ridley. I think that, this is a guy that I felt like once they drafted him, he was going to be the one who took over for Julio Jones, and Julio Jones is going to be the 2. But I do think that with that being the case with Julio Jones now in Tennessee, Calvin Ridley now has to see more of the tougher coverages and the corners. So I think there might be a little, times where he could struggle there. But I still think he's going to be a top wide receiver. I mean, Justin Jefferson is awesome. He is by far an electric player. He is, fun to watch. But you still have to take into account the fact that they have Adam Thielen still. Adam Thielen's still going to warrant a bunch of targets. You have Dalvin Cook, who is the focal point of that offense. I mean, they're a run-heavy offense. So Dalvin Cook is going to be the guy who they kind of build around. And I think that because of them being more of a run-heavy offense, that's why my slight advantage goes to Ridley. And I do think the Falcons may have a possibility of being more in the negative game script will help Ridley compared to when the Vikings are winning. Dalvin Cook is going to be the guy that they'll lean on based on running the clock out and all that stuff. So I think those are kind of two things you have to weigh. But my choice here, because of that, of all the reasons I listed, I'm going to go with Ridley in that position. Now, talking about Julio Jones, here's my third pair of wide receivers that I've been looking at, and this is Julio Jones versus DJ Moore. So Jones right now is the wide receiver 16, and DJ Moore is the wide receiver 18. Now, Jones finished last year as the wide receiver 52. Now, again, he only played 9 games, so I still want to put the stat out there. And Moore was the wide receiver 25. Last year, Moore was 11th in receiving with 1,193 yards and 4 touchdowns. Julio Jones was 41st with 771 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, the Panthers' passing offense was 18th overall. The Titans were 23rd overall. Another stat, too, even though they were 23rd overall in passing, they were 30th in pass attempts, so that's a key stat there. Neither of them had any rushing touchdowns. Obviously Moore had more targets and receptions because of the fact that Julio Jones only played 9 games. But I think if Julio Jones played more games, he obviously would have been higher in the target share and the receptions than DJ Moore. Last year, Moore led the team in end zone targets for the Panthers, so they brought in Robbie Anderson. They signed Robbie Anderson. They had a Curtis Samuel there, so DJ Moore, he still led the team with end zone targets. Now, looking at the strength of schedule, Moore has one of the easiest strength of schedule for wide receivers this year, and the Titans have a pretty medium to hard strength of schedule. So when it comes to who I would choose, interestingly enough, I'm going to take DJ Moore here. So DJ Moore, based on volume, and I think that with Sam Darnold, I think that's an upgrade over Teddy Bridgewater. I know that may be a controversial take, but I think that Darnold is an upgrade from Teddy Bridgewater. And the thing about Darnold, he likes favoring the slot too. So, we got to think about with Curtis Samuel moving on to Washington. Now, do they put DJ Moore into the slot? Robbie Anderson plays on the perimeter. They put DJ Moore into the slot to try to exploit some of the coverages in the slot and get the mismatches. So I think with that being the case, there's a chance that, that could be, happening because Curtis Samuel was pretty up there when it came to slot targets. So I think that, Samuel has 66 receptions from the slot. So I think if they add that to DJ Moore, I think there's a possibility that DJ Moore can actually have a really good year because this is one guy that everyone's been hoping to break out, and he hasn't really had that breakout year. And I think this is a year that's possible that could happen if they're able to get into the slot a little bit more and kind of exploit that. But the thing about Jones, right? So Julio Jones, obviously, you can't deny his talent. Julio Jones, I think will still have a good year with the Tennessee Titans. The problem is, I think what I look at is that the Tennessee Titans, those wide receivers have to be extremely efficient. We look at volume and opportunity, they were 30th in pass attempts. So the opportunity for wide receivers to get a high volume in targets and receptions and touchdowns is really limited. And I think because obviously Derrick Henry being just like the Vikings, Derrick Henry is the offense. Like they just run you down to the run, ground and pound. And hopefully that wears out the defense enough where they continue to be able to score touchdowns and whatnot. But that's the thing. I just think due to the low pass attempts for the Titans, I just think that Julio Jones, I think that obviously he's the number 2 behind A.J. Brown. And I think Julio Jones will benefit from softer coverage. But I still don't see him getting more target shares or having better numbers than what a Corey Davis did last year. Not saying that he's not as good as Corey Davis. He's obviously a lot better than Corey Davis. But I think that when it comes to how the offense is kind of built, I don't think Julio Jones is... I think he's going to be good next year. But I don't think that you're going to see like this wide receiver 1 type of numbers from him. But like I said, I could be wrong, and I'll be willing to take that if that's the case. But I just look at, the offense, the structure of the offense, and look at what they did last year in the pass attempts. I just think that there's opportunity there, but if I had to choose, I'm going to go with a guy with DJ Moore who's probably going to have more opportunity, especially, if he moves to the slot and all that. So those are my picks for today. So like I said, from going from Tyreek Hill and Stefon Diggs, I'm choosing Tyreek Hill. Calvin Ridley versus Justin Jefferson, I'm going with Calvin Ridley. And then Julio Jones versus DJ Moore, I'm going with DJ Moore. So that is it for today. Please like, comment, and share. On the next episode, I'll be doing Would You Rather from the tight end position. So that will be the last video of this series. But I hope you really enjoy this series, and please hit subscribe so you don't miss any more of those episodes. And if you want to find us and follow us on social media, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter at the Gridiron Pod, and on Instagram at the Gridiron Fantasy Football. So have a good day, and we'll see you next week. Take care.